Phil Robertson didn't leave this world with headlines or press conferences. He didn't want that. His final chapter didn't take place in a hospital or a spotlight. It unfolded slowly, silently, in the arms of the woman who never stopped believing he could change, even when he was at his worst. Miss K, his wife, his protector, his only constant, was there from the beginning, and she was there at the end. Through the chaos, the scandals, the alcohol, and the fame, she held on. And when he slipped away, it wasn't just a goodbye, it was a final testimony, a final chance for the world to see what grace really looks like. This isn't just a story about death. It's a story about surviving what should have killed a marriage, what should have shattered a family, and what should have ended long before the cameras ever rolled. But somehow, it didn't. Somehow, love kept showing up, even when no one else did. Because what Miss K posted after Phil's passing wasn't a eulogy, it was a love letter. To him, to God, and to the people still struggling in the mess she once lived in. But before we get to that final message, let's rewind, because Phil's last days were heavier than anyone knew. On May 25th, the news broke. It wasn't a tabloid scoop or a viral leak. It came quietly, from his family. His son and daughter-in-law confirmed what many had feared. Phil Robertson had passed away. There was no official statement about the cause. No dramatic announcement from a publicist, but those who had followed his recent journey knew the truth. Phil had been battling Alzheimer's disease. Slowly, the man who once commanded swamps, boardrooms, and Bible studies began to fade from the world he helped build. And if that wasn't enough, Miss K, his lifelong partner, had her own health scare. Just months earlier, she had been hospitalized for 11 days. A fall turned into a serious infection. Her body was failing too, right alongside his. Behind closed doors, it wasn't the empire you saw on Duck Dynasty. It was a quiet war against time. A couple clinging to their last moments, nursing old wounds, trying to hold on just a little longer. Not for TV, not for followers, but for each other. And yet, right in the middle of that pain, Miss K did something no one expected. She opened her heart to the world, and the world couldn't look away. March 22nd. Just weeks before his passing, Miss K shared what would become one of the most viral, heartfelt messages in the entire Duck Dynasty story. But it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't polished. It was raw, human, honest. Phil takes care of me, and I take care of him, she wrote. Sometimes he fixes a little makeup smudge for me, and I comb the chicken biscuit crumbs out of his beard. It was the kind of sentence that makes you laugh, until you realize how heavy it really is. It wasn't just about crumbs or smudges. It was about devotion, about sticking around long enough to still be brushing off the messes, even after 60 years. She admitted she was still recovering from illness herself, but all she could talk about was how eager she was to get back to taking care of Phil. Not a celebrity, not a CEO, just her pioneer man, her first love, her last love. And then came the line that sent a chill down the spine of every fan who had followed their journey. I love Phil, and I really want y'all to know that the hard years were worth it. That one sentence carried decades of secrets, trauma, survival, and unspoken faith. And Miss K wasn't finished yet, because the story they lived wasn't just personal anymore. It had become something much bigger. She told her followers to go watch The Blind, a movie based on their real past. Not the fame, not the fortune, but the pain, the brokenness, the near divorce, the addictions, and the God who, according to Kay, turned their mess into a message. But what exactly was that mess? What did they survive that made this woman speak with such fire and tenderness in the same breath? The next chapter of this story is where everything nearly fell apart. When Miss K told fans to go watch The Blind, she wasn't plugging a Hollywood film. She was pointing toward her scars. Scars that were once too painful to speak about. Scars that now serve as proof that survival is possible. The Blind isn't a love story, it's a war story. It's the battlefield of a marriage that should have died 1,000 deaths. The movie walks you through the chaos, Phil's drinking, his violence, the betrayal, the shattered dreams. But it also shows something else. The fight to heal what seemed beyond repair. Miss K watched strangers play her and Phil on screen. She saw her darkest nights turned into scenes. She saw her private pain turned into dialogue. But she didn't flinch. She embraced it. Because for her, the point was never to pretend they were perfect. It was to prove they were real. The movie became a ministry, a cinematic sermon, churches started showing it, prison ministries picked it up, parents brought their broken children to see it. And Kay? She stood in the background, smiling. Not because it was glamorous, but because finally, people understood what it cost her to stay. She didn't gloss over their past. She didn't rewrite it. She faced it. And in doing so, she gave hope to every person stuck in a hopeless story. But before there was healing, there was hell. And what happened in the early years of their marriage was nothing short of emotional destruction. Phil Robertson was not always a man of faith. In fact, there was a time when he mocked it, a time when he resented anyone who tried to change him, a time when he chose a bottle over his wife, a gun over his family, and pride over peace. He drank, he cheated, he exploded in fits of rage. There were nights Miss Kay feared for her life, days she'd find him passed out, cursing God, blaming everyone but himself. Their house wasn't a home. It was a war zone. He left, abandoned them, lived in the woods like an outlaw, hiding from the law and from his own shame. People around town had given up on him. He was just another backwoods drunk, dangerous, unpredictable, broken beyond fixing. Miss Kay had every reason to leave, every right to pack up and never look back. But she didn't. Not because she was weak, not because she was naive, but because something in her spirit whispered, "Hold on just a little longer." She prayed, she waited. She cried into pillows while her children asked where Daddy went. And still, she waited. Until one day, Phil came home, not with flowers, not with promises, but with empty eyes and a question that would change everything. Is it too late to fix this? And Miss Kay's answer was one that shook heaven and changed the course of their entire family. When Phil walked through the door that day, tattered, ashamed, hollow, Miss Kay didn't jump into his arms. She didn't cry tears of joy. She looked at him the way only a woman who's seen it all can, with caution, hope, and holy defiance. She didn't need apologies. She needed change. And Phil, for the first time in his life, was ready to give it. He told her he wanted to be clean. Not just sober, but new. He'd heard about Jesus before, mocked him even. But now, in the wreckage of everything he'd destroyed, those words hit different. For the first time, he didn't want to escape punishment. He wanted to be free from himself. Phil repented, publicly, privately, deeply. He didn't just stop drinking, he started reading scripture. He didn't just stop cussing, he started preaching. And he didn't just say sorry, he lived it. His words in a later Instagram post say it all. There was a time when I was a low-down, out-of-control drunk. But there you were, cleaning up my messes and believing with all your heart that Jesus would be there to wash away my sins. Phil found faith, but more importantly, he found forgiveness. And Miss Kay, she didn't just welcome him back, she walked with him every step of the way as he rebuilt the ruins he once set on fire. It was redemption in real time, the kind you don't see on magazine covers, the kind you don't hear about in pop culture, the kind that's bloody, messy, and full of nights where you wonder if grace is even real. But it was. And their story, it was just beginning to echo beyond their home. Most people first met Phil Robertson on television, beard down to his chest, Bible in hand, wild accent, witty quips. He looked like a southern grandpa who hunted ducks and told long-winded parables. But what they didn't realize was he had already lived 3 lifetimes before that camera ever rolled. Duck Dynasty exploded in popularity. It wasn't supposed to. It was a show about a family making duck calls in a Louisiana swamp. But people didn't tune in for business tips. They came for faith, for the family dinners, the prayers, the humor, the chemistry, the chaos. Phil and Miss Kay were the backbone of it all. America watched them laugh, argue, kiss, preach, and discipline. But what made them different was this: nothing was staged. Their love wasn't a performance. It was a testimony. The show brought fame, money, controversy, headlines, interviews. And through it all, Phil never changed his message. Grace, grit, God. That was his motto. And even when he sparked backlash for his beliefs, he didn't flinch. He stood tall, because Miss Kay was behind him, steady as ever. But while Phil was becoming a household name, Miss K was quietly carrying another burden: the emotional exhaustion of being the anchor while everyone else drifted into fame. She cooked, she prayed, she smiled, but behind the scenes, her health was declining, her body was breaking down, her strength, though immense, was wearing thin, and the toll of being the rock finally started to show. For years, Miss K had carried the burden of keeping the family grounded. When Phil was out hunting, preaching, or filming, she was the one holding the house together. And while she did it with grace, the weight of it never left her. But then came the fall. A simple accident, at first. One wrong step in the house, one quick moment of imbalance. What followed was far worse. A wound that wouldn't heal, an infection that spread, and a hospital stay that lasted nearly 2 weeks, 11 days. That's how long she was down. 11 days of silence, of machines, of fear creeping into the edges of her strength. Jace Robertson, their son, revealed the truth in a podcast. Kay was hurting. Her body was frail. And through it all, she never stopped asking about Phil. Even from the hospital bed, her mind was on him. Is he eating? Is he okay? Is he confused? Those weren't the words of a woman feeling sorry for herself. They were the words of someone who knew time was running out, for both of them. Miss K had spent decades nursing a broken man back to life. Now, she was the one fading. And yet, when she left that hospital, she went right back to his side. No excuses, no delay, because love, for her, was never a poem. It was a duty, a calling, a lifetime. Phil Robertson died without needing a fancy funeral or a trending hashtag. His legacy had already been sealed, not with duck calls or TV ratings, but with redemption. He was proof that a man can come back from anything. That rock bottom isn't the end, it's the beginning. And it wasn't just his story that mattered, it was Kay's faith, Kay's sacrifice, Kay's refusal to give up on a man the world had written off. The Blind, their film, became more than entertainment. It became a ministry tool, a story pastors showed to addicts, a message for the broken, the bitter, and the betrayed. Every scene screamed the same truth: you are not too far gone. And as Miss K wrote, if the story of Phil's wild, godless years can help point people to Jesus, that's the story we'll keep telling. Because this wasn't about fame. It never was. It was about legacy, about testimony, about choosing to let your past preach instead of bury you in shame. Phil's death didn't end the mission, it passed the torch. And Miss K, she's still carrying it. Phil Robertson may have taken his last breath, but his voice echoes louder than ever. Through the pages of scripture he quoted, through the episodes of Duck Dynasty that still circulate like digital gospel, through The Blind, where his worst sins were reimagined as scenes of grace. But the real story isn't just about him, it's about her, Miss K, the girl who stayed, the woman who believed, the wife who turned a battlefield into a home, and a drunk into a disciple. Her strength wasn't loud, it was legendary. And her love, the kind people write books about but rarely see. This isn't the end. It's the part of the story where the silence speaks loudest, where legacy begins, where sons and grandsons remember not just the man with the beard, but the man who changed because someone refused to stop loving him. So when the world scrolls past the headlines about Phil's death, let them pause. Let them ask, how did he make it out? And may the answer always be, because Miss K never gave up. Because sometimes the greatest story isn't the man who changed the world. It's the woman who changed the man.